Okay, welcome. This is C# programming for Windows and the web. I'm Emmett Gray. I'm going to be your professor. So this is just a video to kind of go over, the course itself, a little bit of a tour, and basically it's a video version of the syllabus. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so C#, that's how it's pronounced. C# programming for Windows and the web. This is actually should be a fun class. If you've had some programming course in the past, you should probably get a kick out of this. Basically, it provides you everything you need to know about designing and building, applications using C# language. It's not all that in-depth. I mean, there is an awful lot of stuff, but it's not terribly in-depth. But I do tend to stress the concepts and the philosophies rather than, make you memorize a bunch of stuff. So about this class, this is an online class with asynchronous video lectures. Basically, I record all of the lectures, and it's just like sitting there at the course. I mean, sitting there in the classroom. The textbook is this guy, the 8th edition, I believe, right? Yeah, 8th edition. The prerequisites are some other programming class. Hopefully, you've also had programming logic and design before this time. And about 20% of the material is from outside the book, which means you can't just have the book alone. You're also going to have to pay attention to the lectures. Okay, so online videos. So this is videos are broken up into weeks. The videos are released on Monday, typically around noonish. Each video is typically about one chapter a week. Average videos somewhere between 1.5 hours. Total video length, about 17 hours total. And if you go, oh my God, 17 hours of videos. Well, do the math. If this was a 16-week course where we met twice a week for 1 hour and 15 minutes, that'd be 40 hours. So, man, you're making out like a bandit having it this way. The videos are broken up into 15-minute chunks because, you have a life. You have an awful lot of things that are competing for your time. Doorbell rings, kids are crying, all sorts of stuff going on. So I broke it up into chunks so that you can stop, go do something else, and come back. And then later on, I'm going to show you a little trick where you can, use a little gear to speed the videos up if you wanted to. So obviously, this is a asynchronous video, which means everything is recorded in advance. So you can't raise your hand and ask a question because there's nobody at the other end. So you can send me a Canvas email saying, hey, look, I just finished this video and I'm still having some questions about, kumquats. And you go, okay, that'd be perfectly okay. Also, if you want to ask me something like in your middle of doing an assignment, you can say, wait a minute now, I'm a little confused. That'd be perfectly okay. You could kind of send me what you got, so to speak, and say I'm on the right track. And if you need to have an honest-to-God face-to-face meeting, we can do something electronic, WebEx, Teams, Zooms. Or, alternately, we could meet at the university. So, about this class, this is a lecture-heavy course, which means the things that are said and done in class are important. And that's how the quiz assignments are based upon, not necessarily on the book, but on what is said and done in class. I don't rarely use PowerPoint. I don't use the PowerPoint slides that come from the author. I use my lecture notes instead. Lecture notes are just like a script that I'm going to follow to make sure I don't miss anything. Just kind of, it's a little outline of all the things that I'm going to talk about. Anyway. That's how the class is built. And so this is what's called an active class, where you're expected to actually learn and apply stuff. A history class, you can't really apply any history. You can go, okay, I got it. But no one turns around and says, okay, make some history here. Well, in a programming class, it's quite the opposite. Okay, here's how it works. Now do it. So, you're going to be expected to actually apply what you learn. Okay. Learning objectives, applying the syntax, computer programming is half philosophy and thinking, and the other half is just mechanics. A comma goes here, a semicolon goes there, just the rules. And implement varied programming ways such as arrays, function controls, and evaluate using debugging and explain the main concepts in design and implementation and ethical principles. Okay, so the requirements. So all course interaction is in Canvas, obviously. All the assignments and quizzes and all the rest of that stuff. You do need access to a decent computer. You are going to need a Windows-based computer. There's, if you have an Apple or a new, you're probably going to have to install like the ARM version of Windows 11 before you can get in here. We are going to be using software that's only available in the Windows world. And of course, University Library has machines that you could either use or check out. And you do need a reliable internet connection because, man, since everything is being done at home, you don't want like a power outage or an internet outage smack dab in the middle of a quiz. That would be really bad. Okay, so you do need an honest to God PC that we're running 64-bit version of Windows. It's not going to work with an Apple Mac. If you have an Apple Mac, you're going to, if if you have an old one, which is not likely, that's getting kind of old, you can use virtualization for that. If you have a Windows ARM, then the virtualization for that would work. Or you could go completely in the cloud, Azure virtual desktop kind of a thing. So here are some a flow chart that I use, and this is kind of a generic one that fit many classes. So just bear with me. If you have a traditional, machine, poof, you're done. Okay, no problems. If you have one of the new ARM-based machines, I don't think it'll be a problem. I do not know of anyone having problems, but I will tell you it may kind of surprise you. So make sure it's available and install the software. So I'm 99% sure that will work without an issue. I'm gonna skip that one. These two are not really relevant. But so I have a new Apple with the Apple Silicon, M1, M2. Then using virtualization, you install the ARM-based version of Windows and then install the software. And again, this is like 99% sure this will work. Okay, so software. I'm going to demonstrate in lecture how we're going to install Microsoft Visual Studio. We're going to use the one that's called Visual Studio 2026 Community Edition. If you don't already have it installed, then don't install it in advance. If you have it, something similar to that installed, well, I'll kind of hopefully can step you through, make sure you have all the right pieces. You're also going to need to be able to create Microsoft Word documents, but that shouldn't be too difficult, I wouldn't imagine. Anyway, most of you already know that you can get copies of the Microsoft products through the university. Okay, so expectations. What do you expect out of this? Well, you're going to learn an awful lot about program design. And then the mechanics about the language, the syntax and the rules. And then you're going to have to apply what you know by writing applications. You don't really need to be a computer expert to do well in this course. And I'm not certain that I'm going to be, converting you into a computer expert. So this is just a programming language course. So we're going to cover 14 chapters in the book. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing in here out of the ordinary, I don't imagine. We start off with, and then using the command line kind of application. Then we switch over to doing graphical. Then we switch back. It's kind of cool. Okay, so I show this at the beginning of every class. This is Bloom's Taxonomy of Learning. And the point about showing this is to make sure you and I are on the same sheet of music. In grade school, you were asked to, memorize state capitals, the blue kind of stuff. Define, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat. Look, we're long past that. We're in the green. We're in the implement, solve, use, demonstrate, interpret, operate, those kind of things. In other words, it's not just learning stuff. You're going to have to do it. This is very much an active class where you have to do stuff. Okay, just making sure you understand. So kind of to drive home that point, here's a what versus why kind of a discussion. So a what question is, what's the capital of South Dakota? And quite frankly, in my mind, the answer is, I don't know. I'll look it up. I don't need to memorize state capitals, right? And so you might think, so it's same scenario here. In the real world, if you were to go to a programming shop, cube farm somewhere, on the wall of these cubes is our little cheat sheets on how the language works and where to put a comma and where to put a this, right? So that's perfectly okay in the real world. It's perfectly okay here as well, all right? So the what kind of questions is, I forgot how to do that. I'll look it up. I'll use AI, I'll use Google, and I can get what I want. But that's not always going to work for you, because sometimes you need to know why you're doing something. You have to understand it. If there's 3 different choices for loops, which one is the most appropriate for this scenario and why? That kind of thing. So what are the long-term choices? What are the effects? If I make that decision now, am I going to regret it later? That kind of stuff. Yeah, we're into the understanding, not just the mechanics. Okay. Course requirements. There's 2 major exams, a midterm and a final. Midterm is obviously half, and the final is from that point on, so it's not comprehensive, so each half. There's going to be a review session the week of the test. I'll go through a list of all the things that should appear on the exam. 6 quizzes. They're obviously take-home quizzes. 20 questions. Most people can do it in about 30 minutes. 6 assignments. Either a Word document or a zip file of an entire, C# project. And then a term project, 4 weeks notice, and then participation. Participation is based upon, did you do the syllabus exam? We'll talk about that in a minute. Did you do your journals? We'll talk about that in a minute. And that basically determines, how you participate in an online course. Okay. So exams are 10 points apiece. There's 2 of them, and 6 quizzes and 6 assignments. The term project is huge, 1.5 letter grades. That's a lot. Okay. And the participation is 5%. Okay, so grading policies, I go by the 10s, and the first digit. If you have an 8, it's a B. It doesn't matter if it's 89.99999999999. I don't round up. If it starts with an 8, it's a B. Okay, good. All right, so here's the weekly schedule. So typically videos are released Monday morning, probably around, I don't know, at least by 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday. And then everything is due at 11:59 on the following Sunday. So for example, the first Sunday, there's a syllabus exam, a readiness survey, and journal 1. Okay, those are the things that are due. Okay, workload. How much work is this thing? I expect probably about an hour outside of the lecture. And there's a ton of information that's going to be in the lecture notes section. I mentioned that, I use my lecture notes, right? So, yeah, I provide those to you when I'm done. Fast pace, about a chapter per week, lots of topics to cover, and a quiz or an assignment plus journal every single week. Okay, so weekly routine. Sunday is when the assignment or the quiz and the journal is due. Monday, probably about 3 o'clock, 3 in the afternoon, I'm going to release the current week's videos and previous week's lecture notes. Now, this sounds a little crazy, but I don't, during the lecture, I'm using my notes, but I don't give you the notes in advance. I want you to take your own notes. After the lecture, I'll release the notes. Okay? All right. So, exam and quiz. So midterm and final, obviously, they're conducted at home, which means they're open book, open notes, open everything. You think, woohoo, that'd be great. No, a lot of these questions have very little to do with, what's, you're not going to get, what's the definition of this term? Like, no, that's a what kind of question. I want a heck of a lot more understanding behind it. 25 questions, hour and 15 minutes. Take-home quizzes, the open book, open notes, 20 questions. And then I mentioned that I use my lecture notes. Now, here's the thing. I don't use the store-bought question banks that come from the vendor or the textbook. I write my own quizzes. And so when it comes time to write a quiz, I look at my lecture notes and go, oh, wow, that'd be a really good question to ask. Ooh, here's another one. So if I'm using my lecture notes to write the quiz questions, you think maybe it would be a good idea for you to have those very same lecture notes in your hand while you're taking the quiz? Oh, wouldn't that be a good idea? Yeah. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. I mentioned I break these videos up into chunks so that you easily digest them. So stay tuned for part 2.